In a quiet American town, life moved at a gentle pace. Neighbors greeted one another on porches. Children rode their bikes down tree-lined streets, and everyone knew everyone else. But on one October night, that illusion of peace was ripped apart by a scream that echoed through the darkness. It came from the Crawford residence, a large but modest home at the end of Willow Creek Lane. When police rushed inside, they discovered a scene that would haunt investigators for years to come. Emily Crawford, a beloved teacher and mother, lay lifeless on her bed. A single gunshot wound had ended her life. Her husband, Daniel Crawford, stood in shock nearby, his hands trembling as he told officers he had just come home to find his wife like this. His words wavered between grief and panic, but something about his demeanor unsettled the detectives. At first glance, some officers wondered if it could have been a burglary gone wrong. Yet nothing was stolen. The drawers were untouched, jewelry still in place, and the front door showed no signs of forced entry. Whoever had entered the home that night, if anyone had at all, had done so without struggle. Almost immediately, suspicion turned toward Daniel. Detectives learned that behind the closed doors of their seemingly happy marriage, there had been cracks. Emily had confided in her closest friend that Daniel's temper had worsened as his business began to fail. He had borrowed heavily from friends, gambled away thousands of dollars, and faced the collapse of everything he had built. Worse, investigators found out that Emily had recently inherited a sizable sum from her late father. If she were gone, Daniel would gain control of not only that inheritance, but also her substantial life insurance policy. Still, suspicion is not proof. Detectives needed hard evidence. When forensics examined Daniel's clothing, they found traces of gunpowder. The weapon that killed Emily, a handgun registered to Daniel, was found in the couple's closet. His fingerprints were on the grip and trigger. Daniel insisted he had only touched the gun when he discovered her body, claiming he picked it up in confusion and fear. But to the prosecution, it painted a clear picture. Daniel was not a grieving husband. He was a murderer who staged his reaction. As the case moved to trial, the courtroom filled day after day. The story captured the town, then the entire state. The prosecution argued Daniel had reached his breaking point. Drowning in debt and terrified of losing his reputation, he had turned to the unthinkable: kill his wife and solve his problems with money. They called witnesses who testified about Daniel's gambling addiction, his lies to investors, and his growing desperation. They even played his 911 call, highlighting how strangely calm his voice was when he reported his wife's death. But the defense pushed back. They argued that Emily's volunteered work at a local women's shelter had put her in contact with dangerous people. The defense claimed that one of these men, seeking revenge for being reported to authorities, could have targeted her. They presented letters Emily had received months before her death, anonymous notes warning her to stay out of other people's lives. Those letters were never fully investigated by police. Still, the evidence against Daniel seemed overwhelming. A key witness, a neighbor, testified she had overheard a heated argument between Daniel and Emily on the very night she died. Another witness, a friend of Daniel's, revealed that he had spoken about life insurance being the only way out during a drunken night weeks before. Each testimony cut deeper into Daniel's defense. The trial lasted 4 weeks. Journalists filled every seat, scribbling notes as each new detail surfaced. The jury listened as experts explained gunpowder residue tests, financial documents, and digital records. One particularly damning piece of evidence came from Daniel's own phone. Investigators found that he had searched for "How long does gunpowder stay on hands?" only 2 days before the murder. The defense insisted it was a coincidence, claiming Daniel was researching for a crime novel idea he had been toying with. But the jury was not convinced. Finally, after hours of deliberation, the verdict was read. Guilty. Daniel Crawford was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his wife, Emily. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Emily's family wept, believing justice had been served. Others shook their heads, convinced that Daniel had been railroaded. Yet the story did not end there. Months after the trial, a journalist investigating the case uncovered disturbing new information. One of the men Emily had helped put behind bars through her shelter work had been released just weeks before her death. Records showed he had been in the same town the night of the murder. Even more unsettling, DNA from an unidentified male was found on Emily's clothing, but was never matched. Detectives had dismissed it as contamination. The journalist also discovered that police had rushed the investigation. Once Daniel became their prime suspect, they ignored leads that might have pointed elsewhere. The possibility that someone else could have killed Emily was buried under the weight of the prosecution's case. And so, doubt lingers to this day. Was Daniel truly guilty? Or was he a convenient scapegoat for a police department desperate to close the case quickly? Was justice served? Or was an innocent man condemned while the real killer walked free? For the people of that quiet town, the Crawfords' tragedy remains a haunting reminder that beneath the surface of ordinary lives, darkness can lurk unseen.